I'd like to introduce all of you to our, incredible speaker today, very accomplished speaker, Ullas Nambiar. Hello, Ullas. Nice to see you. And thank you for joining. So Ullas is a senior VP of AI research and product development at Accenture, right? And Ullas have seen pretty much, started his journey very early on in data science, data analytics, AI, machine learning, and all of that, and now heading the AI research and product development at Accenture. Before that, Ullas was a CTO of Zensa Technologies. Mismentioning, he has a PhD in computer science, so maybe I should have called you Dr. Ullas. Sorry about that. I hope you don't take offense. I know, a PhD carries a lot of weight. And of course, not just PhD, but he has about 50 plus research papers to his credit and several patents. So we are talking to a very accomplished person in the field of data science, data analytics, machine learning, and all of that. So thank you again, Ullas, for joining this. Before we get into the discussion, I actually got a little bit curious, right? The topic for the discussion, just for reminding everyone, is an emerging role of data science manager, right? What is a data science manager role? Who is this persona or entity? What are their responsibilities? And why is that gaining momentum or importance in India, right? So while I was thinking these through, and in fact, it got reinforced by a little quick LinkedIn research that I did, right? So very fascinating numbers, and I'll give you some numbers. Maybe you can help us, all of us, interpret that in some ways, right? So when I looked at people with data scientist in their title, right, I found about 8.9 million of them worldwide, right? However, in India, we only have 60,000 of them. So there's a huge gap, right? Now, I'm sure there is a good explanation for that, right? But it gets better, right? Then I started searching for people with titles in data analytics, right? Data analyst. And this is interesting. Now, worldwide, there are about 6.97 million, but in India, we have 5.5 million of them. So India seems to be a data analyst company, or rather a lot of data analysts coming from this, right? With at least on the titles. And then another, it gets even better now, right? So I did now search for does anybody has this title called data science manager, right? So is this a new one? It's emerging one. And the numbers are fascinating, right? 5 million or so worldwide. And in India, we have about 350,000 people with data science manager as a title. Now, when I do a quick check of, what is the path that they have taken to come to data science manager, I found predominantly folks from data analyst background, right? And so it seems like we have a huge population of data analysts in India, and seems like a nice career path in front of them to become a data science manager, right? So help us understand these numbers while, and after that, I want to get a quick poll on what is the audience's current understanding of what this data science manager is, right? And then we can, so please go ahead.
Sure. So Sai, I think you spent the morning doing some data science or data analysis, I would say. I think those numbers reflect that we are in India as such, we're in the early stages of this transition to data science, right? And there is a history to it, right? So data science essentially means that you have a lot of data that you own, and then you're trying to crunch those, understand the data, look for insights in the data, and then do some decision making on top of that. And now if you look at Indian IT landscape as such, right, we in the last 20 plus years we have really looked at the back office, and we have sort of brought the strength of our workforce, right, our young vibrant workforce, to sort of taking off the back office of the global entities. So now whereas a lot of the data science and the decision making that comes out from data science is usually front office, is more strategy, more business focused. And rightly so, since these businesses have been running outside of our domain or our geography, early growth in that space has happened outside of India. because the decision makers are sitting outside, right? We are still supporting the back office. Now, as more and more our own economy is growing, we are going to become a 5 trillion economy. A lot of homegrown institutions are coming up, right? And we are homegrown as well as global institutions, right? Which are seen as, bellwether organizations coming out of India. We will see that paradigm shift which is coming through, right? So we will have more and more people. In fact, I think the entire product leadership initiative that Pinkesh and team has started is also, and I would say, a beacon that we are now moving towards more of a product sort of ecosystem versus the services ecosystem that we started, right? And so the same applies to data science, right? So I would not call this, I would call this as an inflection point, right? And it will change. So there is a pre-COVID and a post-COVID. We'll have to see post-COVID what is the normal going to be, right? But the fact is that we are on an upwards trajectory. So these numbers should not dishearten us. If anything, these should actually give us more hope that there is more scope for these roles to come within India, more of our folks to actually step up and become these. And our education system actually helps us there, right? We almost everyone has a math background and a science background. So it's actually good for us. I think a lot of our engineering students can actually, if they're so desire, take on this path, right? It's not going to be easy. I mean, I just want to be very pragmatic here, right? None of this is going to be easy, right? It is not a fly-by-night wire or fly-by-night kind of an operation that today you are an engineer and tomorrow you are going to become a data scientist, right? It will take its own time, its own scope. And bigger, more than that, I think people should be driven by, are they passionate about what they are doing, right? There is always a hype cycle, and data science was on the hype cycle a couple of years back. Last year it was AI, this year it is COVID, right? So next year we will come back to what it is going to be. But let's not go with the hype. Let's go with the fact that what is it that you like? What is it that you can bring to the table? It's a change, right? And people should expect that nothing is going to be easy here. But I think it's a fair one. I think it's a great place to be.
So the takeaway from that is, I think the future is bright for people who want to pursue into not just the data science, core data science role where it is math heavy, computing heavy, but into roles where we will talk about on what this data science management and manager is, right? Specifically around it. So I want to get your perspective on, start from the beginning, just start peeling the onion to understand what is the data organization, constitution, and all of that. But before that, as I said, let's just do a quick poll from the audience to see, what is the composition of this audience and what is the level of understanding of what the role around data science manager is, right? So I encourage all of you listening in to take this quick poll and give us your view on, have you heard of this data science manager? And understand this and understand how to get to this role if that is what is important, right?
Yeah, that'll be great. This reminds me of the KBC phone a friend or audience poll kind of stuff, right? I should pick the answers based on what is the highest. But
no, I think that, this is always throws us off because at least to me, what I believe is going to be the majority viewpoint doesn't always turn out, right? And here what we are seeing right now is majority of the folks, about 50 to 55% of the folks are saying, hey, it is a product manager role with strong data science background, right? And and maybe that's not what this means, and we would love, we'll get to that discussion to understand this better. But let's start with a quick view on, you run a data organization, right? And there are lots of data teams that are being set up by many companies, acknowledging the importance of usage of data in decision making, in data-driven decision making, right? So what is a typical composition or constituents of these data teams? What roles and titles come in? I mean, we keep hearing a lot of buzzwords, right? Data analyst, data engineer, data scientist, and all of that. So help us, give us, throw some light on that.
Right. So it's a great question. And I would say there is not one single answer here, right? keep in mind that these roles and titles change with time, with the hype cycles that we go through, right? So if you look at it a couple of years back, a whole bunch of titles were around data science, right? You would have a data scientist or a data engineer, or a senior data scientist, principal data scientist, right? Or head of data science, chief data officer. This was something that was touted a couple of years back as the significant other CXO role, which is going to come, right? And in none of these titles which I have taken, you would see the differentiation between a leadership role versus individual contributor role. Right? So these titles mean that you could have either of those, right? So you could be a principal data scientist and have a team, or it could be a principal data scientist who is super smart individual who just gets very hands-on and is churning out the latest of maybe pricing models, right? And just making so these titles do not really align with the standard management understanding of how our organizations are built, right? Because they were typically new and people are really exploring what could this be. So you could, that's why I said, so chief data officer is something you would know, okay, would have a team, but you could not look at a principal data scientist and say it's an individual contributor. It varied with the organization you would go in, right? The larger organizations would obviously mean that principal data scientist was somebody who's looking at strategy.
So you're saying don't go by the titles, but
don't go by the title, right? Go by the role, right? Go by the organization, go by the organization size of the team. Size of the team is more important.
Okay.
Largely, data science teams are not going to be humongous, right? So we are used to a services economy where managers have 200, 300 people, VPs have 1,000 people. Whereas if you are a VP of data science, you would have a 20-member team, right?
And so does this only constitutes constituent is data scientists, or do we also have the other data wizards, I call them, right?
Correct.
So analysts, engineers, and
So let me step back, right? So I have always called data scientist as a mythical beast, like the unicorn, right?
Unicorn.
There is no data scientist, right? Because if you look at data science, right, you need the technical acumen, right? So you really need to understand your algorithms, your statistical models, your machine learning models, and your AI models, your deep learning models, right? So you need somebody who is really good at the technical aspects of number crunching, right? And then you could have a statistician who could do a lot of these on the very standard structured business data, right? So now you have two different, competencies which nobody ideally would have, right? Then you need somebody who understands the business, right? Who can go in and understand, okay, where is data coming from? What is the data used for, right? And then you need someone who is great at visual storytelling, right? Somebody who can visualize, right? And so on and so forth. And then you need a domain expert, right? So all of this is fine. But if suppose you are in, and I'll give some examples. I have ran data science for Myntra, which is a fashion tech business, right? So, and I went in, I had no fashion experience, right? I was before that I was doing healthcare. So from healthcare to fashion tech is a huge shift. So you needed somebody who was an SME in fashion, right? Who understood, okay, what styles go together, right? What does a catalog typically look like? What is menswear, women's wear, right? What buys in the season, off season? So you need an SME who comes in. Now you don't expect all of these to come from one individual. So data science teams are what I typically call, right? The data science team would have all of these capabilities.
Okay. So you're calling on as data science teams, not just a
data scientist, right?
There are all these roles
these roles, correct, right? And then if you're building products and for using them, you need an architect, you need a proper engineer, right? You need an engineering team, which is doing
so the data engineering team is the one that, if based on limited understanding and help us throw light on this, is the one who looks at data, wrangles it, processes it, labels it, tags it, and then cleans that up for using for models.
To certain extent, yes, certain extent. So I would call a data engineering team as someone who is sort of getting down and dirty into the data and saying, okay, here are 10 different disparate systems from where data is getting generated today. We need to stitch all of that together to give a unified view for our data scientists or data science teams to actually now slice and dice, right? So you are actually taking from this disparate, you're bringing those pipes, you're keeping them alive, you're ensuring they're running every day, right? And then loading into your data warehouse or your data lake, right? And from the data lake, then your scientists will come in and take some piece of the data lake and say, here is how I'm going to massage this, is the main insights. Right? So those both are critical functions. Both are important functions.
So all of this is part of a typical data project workflows. Is that fair to say that ingestion of data and then processing
Right.
of that. Okay.
Right.
And what other steps or workflows are there right
So,
from the beginning?
yeah, so typical data science and I still hope that we'll go beyond this, right? Typical data science seems to be more like a lab experiment, right? So
Yeah.
people, even if you have data science teams, the data science output doesn't go into a live product very easily, right? So it becomes a decision-making input. It goes into a lot of charts and presentations,
Okay.
but doesn't really become a consumer-facing product that easily, right? Unless you have, let's say, that's the reason I give up Mintra, right? Unless you have an app and you're a B2C company and you're able to put those insights into action very quickly.
Right.
So
in this context now, what we're saying is the person with a role of managing the project, the workflows, and also the various roles that are there in the team, including analysts. Are we calling this role now as a data science manager, or is
yeah, I would call so again, I would say this is dependent on the organization, right? The titles, as I said earlier, are dependent on the organization, how the organization is structured, how the overall leadership is structured, right? So it could be that data science manager is a very technical individual who is managing a few very junior data scientists and data engineers and data analysts. Or in a large organization, data science manager could be somebody who is taking a data science program into the business and impacting products in the business, right? It depends on the maturity of the organization itself, right? If it is a mature data-driven organization, then data science manager could be somebody who just comes and puts all of this together and takes that as an offering to the other.
So this is not a people management role who manages just the people, but actually has strategic implications and needs to take a much more business point of view and work with the data folks in the team to get projects going.
Right. Yeah. As again, I would say it would not work for every organization. Right? The smaller the organization, the more the number of caps you're going to wear. The larger organization, it will be much more easier. The clarity of the role is going to be better, right? And the functionality could also be more as business and strategic versus people management. Again, as I said, it could be different, right? I mean, as a manager, it could be team lead. Look, you could say data science team lead. And as I said, if you're looking at technical people management roles in a data science team, typically it is called senior data scientist and a principal data scientist, right?
Or we are seeing manager data science. Is that
yes?
Right?
Manager data science is more of a people management role, right? Versus looking at a product as such, right?
Right.
So I think that roles, the titles do not actually sort of say what it is. Right?
Correct. So for all practical purposes, what we are saying here is the role of a data science manager is in smaller organization, it will still involve people managing. In larger organization, the emphasis or the time where they need to spend more is around with the business stakeholders, with the product strategy, and bring in that perspective and those needs and those requirements into the data projects and create data projects and workflows around them and make sure that, and of course there are a few other things that I want to check with you whether that is so, which means that this particular role would need to work and collaborate with cross-functional teams. Is that a fair thing to say?
Right. So let's take a step back, right? So data science is in all organizations is seen as a very niche team, right? Usually you would report into the CTO or the CDO or the Chief Innovation Officer, right? And it is seen, it's in a heavy duty team. It is seen as strategically important, right? In many ways, right? So all organizations want to say that they have data science.
At least they want to be seen that they are doing something about it.
Right. So it's a marketing tool.
Correct.
So you have a lot of people who bring that, outside in perspective of we are doing something cool and fancy. But also it means that there is a lot of visibility, right? And there is a lot of focus on the team, right? And I think people have become smarter at leveraging that team of late. But early on, it was mostly sort of an ivory tower role. It was put on a pedestal and showcased around. It was not really seen as something that would really add to the productivity of the organization, but largely more of a marketing and a mind share gain opportunity, right? So that's why the teams were smaller. Of late, people have started becoming saying that, okay, all organizations are data driven now. So you need to have a lot more, insights coming out from the data you generate or you consume. And based on that, can you make your processes leaner, better, sharper, products better? So there is a lot more focus on leveraging the data science teams today.
Sorry, go ahead.
And all I'm saying is that with the last couple of years, the data science team has now taken a shift towards more of being called as a machine learning team or an AI team.
Right? So just to keep up with the buzzwords that are going on.
Buzzwords, yes, yes.
Okay, good. And how do you see a career path evolving for somebody who wants to get into this data science manager role? What is the few steps ahead, just to give them a viewpoint?
Right. And I would call it as for every role, right? In every organization, there are two paths you can take, right? It is, and the same is applicable to data science, right? So if you come into a data science team, let's say you graduate from a top university, come fresh into an organization and become a data scientist there, let's say junior data scientist. Right?
Or also, given by the numbers that we saw, a lot of data analysts possibly wanting.
Correct, right? So even if you join the team, right, and you start as a data analyst and you start moving up, right? Typically you will start as an individual contributor, right? And then once you start as an individual contributor, you have two paths to progress. There is a technical path or a technical ladder that you take, and there is a managerial ladder, right? And in other parts of the organization, the managerial ladder eventually becomes a people managerial role. Whereas data science or machine learning or AI is always going to be deeply technical, right? And the people who your constituents, your team is always going to be technical, right? They will always need technical guidance here. So if you are coming from within the team, you will still have to keep up with your technical chops, right? So irrespective of how high you go, people still are going to look up to you and say, okay, I'll go and suddenly throw a random
data science
statement.
guy.
You're a data science guy. I will come and talk to you about this NP hard problem, and you should be able to still not balk at the fact that this is NP hard, right? You will still have your technical pieces, right? Whereas that is not the case when you are looking at the other business lines, like your sales or your marketing.
Yeah, correct.
You can have pure people management skills, right? You may not really understand, or you may be a salesman in the past, but now you're looking at an entire geography, right? And you're not doing on the ground sales. Whereas the technical roles, given the fact that these teams are going to be small, right? Even if you grow, you will not have the 1,000-member data science team. You still have a 100-member data science team.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and all of these, and one of the things that this may not be politically correct, but data scientists and AI engineers have a huge persona, right? So because they are seen as these, superstars. Correct. There are superstars. They have egos to manage and egos to maintain, right? So even as you grow higher up, people management skills are very, very important. How do you understand what are the strengths of each of the individual on your team? How do you make sure that you're leveraging, giving them the best of opportunities and making use of their skills to the best outcomes?
So for those people who want to go down that path from the data science manager, along with people management, you're talking about head of data science or chief data officer as probably the role. But still you're emphasizing that since it's still a technical role, you still better know when somebody comes and asks you that algorithm.
Absolutely, right? And that's the same with a technical organization. If you're into the engineering also, right? If you're VP of engineering, you still need to know what is the latest programming models, right? You really cannot go away with that. So that's the truth of data science.
Correct. Okay. So I think in briefly you alluded to something which I want to check with our audience. Is data science and data science manager specifically limited to certain industries or is it industry agnostic, right? So let's see if we can get a pulse from the audience what they think about it right now.
Yeah.
So that maybe I'll share the results. Last one I missed sharing that results, but this one because you kind of mentioned that in your past experience on fashion industry, healthcare industry, it was also very robust use cases and users, right? So
So I would say that every organization today is a digital organization, right? In every organization, moment you're a digital organization, you are going to churn out data, and you need to now make sense of this data, right? Whether it is coming from your internal processes, or you are interacting with your customers and partners, and they are generating data, right? So I think the data science is something that is applicable across industries.
Looks like the audience agrees, so that's good.
That's a good one. That's
I think it's good to understand what the so that we can address it if that is not the case, right? So now I think I want to is this a hype thing, or is this something real? What is the importance of this? Why is this particular role that we mentioned about the data science manager important? Is it because of the constituents of the team that you said, individual contributors, strong personas in either data analysts or data scientists or data engineers, and so what? So what's the problem here for an organization or a team, and why? Right. What is the need for us to bring that particular role to orchestrate this?
Right. So a couple of things, right? And this is typical to all leadership roles, right? All leadership roles, one of the key aspects of a leadership role is to drive, or is to motivate your team, right? Lead by example, set the visions, identify what is the growth path for your team as a whole, how is it aligned to the organization, and how that helps the individual, right? So that remains constant even if you're a data science manager. Each of the individual team members are going to ask, what is the growth path? How am I contributing? Why am I valuable, right? So you need to be able to articulate that well, right? So if you aspire to grow into that role, your team members are going to ask that question, right? So what is it? Because remember, as I said, data science is not still seen as a positive contributor to the overall top line of the business. It is a hidden, it's something that drives the engine, but it's not sales, right? You're not driving sales. Sales, it's easy to see the number, right? So I close so many deals. This is the top line I have brought in, right? And if you're a delivery, then I can come and say, okay, these many products I have delivered, these many customers I have interacted with. Now,
so it's only it's only a matter of time that the businesses will ask for, or business stakeholders will ask for ROI, right?
ROI, right? It'll take some time, and not everybody is going to understand the value of the organization, right? So your chief innovation officer is going to definitely understand. Your CDO understands. Your CTO understands, but your head of sales may not understand what this brings, right? Your HR head may not understand really how the value is coming, right? Your other business, heads may not understand. So you need to actually explain the value that the team is going to bring, right? And it is not very visible, right? Unlike other metrics, as I mentioned, this is not very visible that how you added value to this, because
that's right.
While if you give the insights from the data, somebody has to act on those insights for them to become business and
to even derive the value out of it.
Derive the value, right? So that's the biggest challenge, right? So people will start feeling, okay, how am I really contributing? Are we really valuable to the organization, right? And so the metrics have to be different, and the organizations have not figured out the right metrics for evaluating a data science or a team or a data scientist as such, right? They typically tend to have, and all large organizations have standard metrics and standard curves and all of that. So it becomes a little difficult. So the data science manager, you need to be able to, walk that path of what the business wants, what your team wants. It's a little bit more complex because you have these personas who are very strong, right? And the other big challenge which I have from my experience, and it could be others may have different experiences, that these are strong individual contributors, right? They have not been trained to work on large teams, right? So working on teams, working with cross-functional teams, working with teams, and remember, data science, as I said, is a niche team, also is a high-profile team, is a high intellect team, right? Whereas the rest of the organization may not have the same intellect, they may not be of the same wavelength. So it becomes a little hard for these people with higher IQs to work with people with normal IQ, right? So that is also the thing that the data science manager will have to do, right?
So essentially, it's something that the engineering teams went through a couple of decades ago.
Right? Before it became the norm, engineering was seen as something that happened in the ivory tower. They have an R&D, R&D labs, they used to do something. Now data science has gone there, right? R&D has become kind of everyday business, but data science is still there. So you still have to have, how do you dumb down some of the stuff and make sure others understand it, right? So those communication, the ability to actually sell your organization. So data science manager is also a salesman, or a saleswoman, right? They have to constantly sell the value that the team is going to bring, because the value is not perceivable. It doesn't come in your, books. It doesn't really come. Only thing that comes in the books is the cost.
Yeah.
Right? Right. So it becomes a little harder. It's something that you have to be sitting there. You have to believe in the team, and you need to bring that, belief into your team. Team have to start believing that they are contributing, right? And then sell upwards. I think the key is to sell upwards. Selling outwards eventually happens, right? As you go up into head of data science and a chief data officer, you will also start interacting with the outside organization. You start interacting with your marketing agencies, your analysts. You will start talking to the customers, right? And at that point, you will need to start being a more strategic sales role. But till then, it's internal sales, right? You want to constantly be evangelizing your team, right? And
so two things you're saying. One is evangelizing to your business stakeholders who are investing in this, to say that, here is what we are doing. Here is the, progress that's being made. While there may not be immediate ROI, that is very important to keep the communication going. Otherwise, people who don't see this, people who don't understand this, might consider this as a cost that can be cut as the first instance, right? So it's a very challenging role there. The other one is managing the team itself, and not just individuals and their own whims and fancies, but also in terms of the processes and workflows, right? So many, I mean, I keep hearing this from several folks in the industry that, my data science team is really experimenting, creating prototypes, but they are just that. They are prototypes. We are not able to take this to the production. So does the DSM or data science manager influence or put these things in place?
Correct. Yes. So I think it's also important for data science managers to start becoming more focused on delivery, is in delivering outcomes from the team. Identify individuals who are more focused towards creating an end-to-end product. And then there are certain individuals who are still going to be more exploratory, very experimental. They like being on the cutting edge and the bleeding edge of things. But many times when you're the bleeding edge of things, you don't really get a product, because you still take time to actually build that, understand the fallout of this technology you're using. So you still have to carve out a small team out within your data science team, which is looking at beyond the horizon. I call it as horizon 3 in projects, right? Everybody wants to work on horizon 3 because there is no accountability, right? You're basically saying, I'm going to go to other galaxy. Moonshot. Everybody wants to be a moonshot, right? But moonshots are not going to pay your bill, right? Moonshots will pay after 20 years. So you still want to do your horizon 1 and horizon 2, which is the 6 months down the line. What are you going to give back to your business? What are you going to do in 2 years? And then what are you going to go after and develop in 3 or 5 years, right? And this has to be aligned to the larger organizational goal and strategy. And strategy is a living organism, right? It keeps changing as the ecosystem changes. Now, so you as a data science manager or a lead of data science team, you need to be aware of this. You need to be plugged into what's happening. And if you're not plugged in, you need to ask that seat on the table, right? And then transfer that information back to your team. Identify that everybody is aligned on that and they understand, right? Sometimes, and the key is also to be not faced by failure, which is the biggest issue with data science, right? Unlike the other parts of the organization, right? Other parts, engineering, it's a given, right? You start doing a project, there is an outcome, and you decide that it's always going to be successful.
And you kind of master that flows in terms of experimenting, testing, figuring out what works, what not. But here we're still in rapid experimentation phase. And a lot of failures, because do you call that as a failure, or do you call that it's an incorrect, different conclusion, right?
It's a learning, right? So I think that's the other piece, that when you start evangelizing to the other outside of within your team, outside of within the larger organization, I think that's going to be a challenge, right? So how do you actually convince the people that this is more like running a startup, like innovation teams or data science teams? They will have a high rate of failure. They will try lots of things, right? But people are also going to ask for successes. So you need to have those easy to do things which you show as success, and the harder ones you convince that this will take some more time. But people expect something to come out periodically, right? So managing those are going to be the challenges as a data science manager, right? Setting expectations and ensuring that people understand difference between this team versus other teams.
No, it sounds like a lot of responsibility, but very exciting role to go with. Now, one little perspective on, are all these roles going to be separate, or are you seeing this as merging or converging into few people in terms of, yeah?
No, I think if you're asking about the data science team, the way we explain data analyst, data engineer, the machine learning team, the visualizing team, I think the way is going to be more of, specialization, right? So you expect, as you start building bigger and bigger things, you expect more and more specialists to come in. So if I am somebody focused on visualization, I want the person to actually go to the next best way of visualizing, right? And instead of websites, is this reactive apps. Now I want that person to actually show that, right? So you don't expect that role to be now done by your machine learning engineer,
right?
Because the learning curve for that engineer is going to be too huge, and the first products are going to be shoddy. So you will expect more of these roles to come in. I would say an SME role, right? Let's say if the organization starts diversifying, right? So now you may have an expertise in a certain line of business. Maybe you're in the food industry, and suddenly you go into agriculture industry. Now you don't have the expertise of that, so you will need to bring one more SME into it who understands agriculture, somebody who understands pharma, somebody who understands healthcare. So more and more people are going to come into the team. It is going to become bigger. It is going to get more and more specialized.
Okay.
So that's going to be key, especially as you start becoming more and more important to the business. I think people will take more specialized roles.
Specialized. So look, we've talked about this role being interfacing with the business stakeholders, trying to communicate with them, explain to them the progress and the time it's going to take for the ROI, while internally doing it and evangelizing it. Essentially, a big evangelization role, while still being technical and the skills that you need, because you are now dealing with a lot of technical roles. So before we get into the skill sets that would be required, I want to take a quick poll from our audience to see what they think or what kind of skill set might be needed, right? So, and then you can comment on that and elaborate on that to see, what skills might apply here and what people should be equipping themselves with.
Sure.
Good. I think, again, I encourage folks on the call to, just take a vote so that we get a good representation. And by the way, these results will be shared as part of the Insights report that will be public after this festival, and you will get a copy of it. You can look at this and so help contribute towards creating these insights from the audience here. Good. I think so. Let me just share with you also, Ullas, for you to see. Are you able to see the results?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So it looks like a majority of the people are saying both data analysis and business understanding. Looks like pretty much everybody agrees with all the skills here, right? Right. Is there anything that is missing here, or is there something that you don't believe is going to be requiring high importance or value in this?
No, I agree with those lists. I think, but I feel that one of the key things is the soft skills part of it, right?
Okay.
So leadership skills is a very broad area. Right? The rest of them were technical. Right?
So maybe we can, in that category, if you can highlight us, what are the specific soft skills that you refer to?
So I feel this is not just for data science, right? This is across the board for engineering teams, right? And the engineers are not the best of communicators, right? It takes an effort on their side to communicate, especially with folks who are not as tech savvy as they are.
Indeed,
right?
yeah.
And remember, those are the guys who are in the business side of things. They are the sales, right? Yeah. You don't expect an engineer to become a sales guy and come to you, right? You expect somebody with a marketing and a sales background to come here. Your end clients and consumers are not going to be as tech savvy as you are. It's like driving a car, right? You drive a Ferrari, you don't really understand what goes inside. You're just a rich person buying the car and driving it, right? If you're an enthusiast, obviously you know how it goes, right? But if you're just an average guy, most of the time you don't understand what the technology that goes into a car. Same applies to people who are going to use data science and AI as part of their products they use, right? So you would need to be able to communicate the value you're bringing, one internally as well as to your external audience, the consumers, right? So key to me is the effective communication. And the other piece of effective communication is to understand who is the receiver of this communication. Right? So within your organization, if you're talking to your manager who is very tech savvy, you can go into the depths of technology, and that's the expectation. Right? You don't kind of hide the facts. Right? You go deep into the technology and you explain and try to debate and discuss and come up with a product. But if the higher up you start going, or you go into a different line of business, you're talking to your VP of engineering or to your head of marketing and sales, you need to be able to convince that person saying there is value in what you're doing, right? But not trying to go and give algorithmic detail to that individual, because the person is not going to grasp it, and it's a waste of the time, and the person is not going to see value in participating with you or partnering with you. And that is going to be key, how to present the right level of information and the right type of information at the right point in the conversation, right? That's the key, right? That's why I say that communication is going to be key, and it is not just data science, right? I think in any corporate career, the ability to communicate is going to be key. Right?
So under the ambit of communication, you also seem to be referring that because you need to work with cross-functional teams, there is a negotiation aspect, there's influencing aspect, all of these things come into that.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
yes.
Okay.
So
And so not just the technical skills, but technical skills like what we saw around stats and analytics, and probably even predictive and prescriptive is going to be more important. But also the business skills, right? The business skills could include, and you're saying that this is a strategic role. You need to start thinking this in terms of how does the work that your team does impact the strategy, and vice versa, right? What is how do we incorporate the strategy into this, which clearly includes some. I'm guessing that you need to understand some financial skills as well, business finance skills, right? So awesome. And so there are questions that are coming up on these topics. We'll take a couple of them just in the interest of time, and I'm just trying to paraphrase some of these things, right? So one is there is a skill gap, and in the teams among the people, especially in all the skills that we talked about. How can one bridge this skill gap? How can we transform our career towards a data science manager? Are there any tips that you can give to bridge that gap in oneself? And of course, it's also a function of the organization, whether that organization has such a role, right? And so any tips on that?
So
should we just go to online courses and do it, or how?
I think the key is this, right? So typically engineering teams prefer their bosses to be engineers, right? And it's a known fact. There are lots of studies about that, right? If a non-engineer comes in, or a non-technical individual is leading the team, there is a loss of productivity to the team, right? Overall, they don't look up, they don't believe what the leader is saying, right? Because they don't trust the individual to understand their challenges, right? So, but again, this is organizational in nature, right? So if you're coming at a very senior level, then obviously they expect you to know more about the business than the technical. So if you are like the first line manager, I will use the term first line, which is I am the lowest rung as a data scientist, and I have somebody who is leading me as a manager. I have a group of 4 or 5, and somebody is managing us. My expectation is that I should be able to have a very technical, strong conversation over a cup of tea or a coffee with my manager, right? But if I'm talking to a head of data science or a VP of data science, that person better understand the business. That person better understand how I'm going to get promoted, how I'm making impact, and not so much as about linear regression, right? Because I am never going to go and talk to this gentleman or lady about linear regression and the deep learning and ResNet and all of that, right? I expect that person to be able to sell to the CXOs, right? So the level that you're going to come in, the team's expectation varies about that. And that is not just data science. It is across the organization. In any team that you go, the higher up you are, the expectation is that you are more business savvy and you are able to convince your peers at that level, right? So that applies. So if you are coming in as a data science manager and you have a team of 20 and there are a couple of team leads or data science leads under you, then the expectation from the team is going to be that you are able to convince your chief innovation officer, chief data chief data officer, or CTO, or the CEO even, right?
Which means
to
you don't
invest more.
Yeah, which means don't just be buzzword compliant, but you really need to get a hands-on experience on at least one end-to-end project, so that you are able to understand the nuances in it, so for you to have a meaningful conversation with your team, as well as also have that conversation with your leadership.
Right. You would, ideally, I would say somebody who is playing that role should have delivered 1 or 2 projects end to end, right? Being part of such initiatives, then slowly grown up that organization. So it may not be data science. You could be an engineer. You could have done some technical work and developed a product and be part of an end-to-end delivery. And then you've grown from there. And now you are taken up an AI or a data science team. At least you understand the technical challenges of building, define, design. I call it as 4 Ds of product management, right? You define, you design, you develop, and you deploy. But if you do the first 3, but you never do the deployment part of it, you are an incomplete leader. There's all the nightmares that you can think of will come in your deploy stage. All your assumptions are going to go out of the window when you deploy. And if you have done a couple of those, you now know you are smart. You can start defining based on the deployment you're going to do. Otherwise, you're going to be, doing a pie in the sky kind of thinking, right? And that's not what somebody expects from the leader. You want the leader to have done this before, right?
Yeah.
So that's a key aspect to it.
Good. So one last question before we wrap this up. And by the way, thanks to Rajan and Naresh for asking that question before. So Shruti is asking, essentially, can you help us understand what role does a product manager play in all these things in data science team?
Right. I think it's a great query, right? And I've had this outside of this conversation also in the past. People have come and said, I'm a product manager. Now I have to bring data science or AI into my product. And so far I was doing more of engineering. Now, and suddenly I feel short. I'm not able to have a conversation, right? And I would say that if you're a product manager, you should already be doing this, right? You are an influencer, right? I mean, maybe people use the term CEO, etc. But if you have worked closely with a CEO, you will know that a CEO brings in a CXO. A CTO or a CFO, it's not because they don't understand it. It's because they need that specialist skills of that domain to come. So it's the head of sales, head of data science. All of these are roles that you need to have. Similarly, as a product manager, you need to be aware that, okay, I need to understand this domain, but I did not solve the problems in that domain. And I need to understand what data science can do or what AI can do. But there was always going to be an AI lead I'm going to be partnering with, right? As far as I am able to influence, I'm able to get a partnership going with that individual who's leading the team, I'm in good hands. I don't need to understand the nth level of the deep learning network which has been created by them. That's not what a product manager is supposed to do. The same argument as I said, right? They are starting to look at you as, can you bring new business to me? Can you explain this value I'm deriving to the business stakeholders, right? Can you ensure that we as a team are seen as valuable, right? That's what the product manager is supposed to do. And then connect with the sales team, the marketing team, the engineering team, all of those things. Ensure
and make sure that the value is actually delivered.
Value is actually articulated well. You set the timelines. You would have multiple deliverables going to come in. You ensure that nobody is slacking. That's what a product manager is supposed to do, right? So today it's data science, tomorrow quantum computing key is going to come, right?
Indeed.
We cannot suddenly start becoming quantum computing experts just because we're a data product manager, right? So you will still have your core capabilities. You would have come with a capability. That's why you became a product manager. Right. So my suggestion to all the folks who are now looking at this is to not feel short, right? They should feel confident that I have done this before, right? And it's just a new skill. It's a new team I have to work with, a new team I have to influence. It's a new partnership. So it will take some time, right? I mean, it's like any other relationship. Every relationship takes time, right? They need to start trusting you.
And more importantly, I think this looks like a really good opportunity, especially for professionals with some data background, to get into from a career path perspective, right? It looks like great. And companies are realizing that as more and more they set up the teams, you now need somebody to anchor that team, to be able to be interfacing with the business stakeholders, to be able to evangelize the work that is being done. And of course, to get to that role, you have outlined a few skills around technical, business, and soft skills, right? So leadership ones. So awesome. I think this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for your insights, Ullas. Really appreciate it.